Okay, so this is the bullying and teasing makeup training. And so, an overview, the goal is to give all staff members an understanding of the basics of bullying and teasing and some techniques and strategies for prevention and intervention. And so, um, so when we did this training in person, we did start out with like an interactive activity where each counselor would write down a situation or statement that was done or said to them that was mean or that they perceived as bullying when they were between 6 or 16, or it could have even been recently. And so when we did that, we threw the papers into the middle of the room and then picked up a random paper and said those words and shared those words in our groups. And so doing that exercise and reading the statements, some of them were really, really hurtful. And the fact that these things could have happened a very long time ago and that they still stuck with these people shows how influential bullying can be and how negatively impactful it can be on someone's life. And so, why is this important? This is why people, especially kids, bully and tease each other. Bullying and teasing gives you power over someone else and acts as a way to recreate the social network so that the bully has more power and control. Um, it should be noted that 99% of bullying and teasing happens because of this kind of social manipulation. Um, and so here are a couple myths about bullying and teasing. So bullies are socially inept and have no other way to connect. Another one is that bullying and teasing is extreme and atypical behavior. It is an epidemic. And another myth is that targets are weak, awkward, or otherwise asking for it. In reality, bullies bully and tease because it's a relatively successful social strategy, and most of the time it's done in fairly sophisticated ways that you don't necessarily notice it until it becomes a perpetuated cycle. And then bullying and teasing is a pretty typical behavior, especially among kids. And targets often have fewer strong social connections, making them more isolated. And so keep in mind that the majority of our campers today probably feel completely powerless in their situation at home in whatever circumstances that they're dealing with their cancer stories. They really don't have control over that, and they don't really have control over what has happened or what could happen. And so they most likely will be probably feeling some type of powerlessness and maybe suppressing this whirlwind of emotions. And so this is where the bullying could be stemming from. And bullying could be their desire to want to control their environment, control something within their life because they feel like they aren't controlling anything um, other than that. And so our job is to keep that out of the camp environment and to make it a supportive environment where these campers can be what can feel safe, validated, and respected, or safe, safe, validated, and respected. So bullying is not okay, and it is unhealthy and incredibly damaging. Again, as you saw with the activity that you would have done if you were there in person, um, it can last with you for a lifetime, and we do not want our kids to be susceptible to things like that. So um, we are going to recognize the different kinds of bullying. So there are 4 different types. There's social, physical, cyber, and verbal. Um, Things that you will experience at camp are mostly going to be social, verbal, or maybe even physical, not really cyber, because we are not going to be using our phones at camp. And so um, during our training in person, we talked about a few scenarios where bullying could occur in the first few hours of camp, during activity rotations, during all camp activities at meal times, during non-program downtime, and at night. And so within the first few hours of camp, that is when all of our campers are being introduced to the campsite. They're signing in, they're getting their name tags, they're getting water bottles. A lot of the new campers may be coming in and they will know any of the returning campers, just as returning campers um, may know more people. And so an example of bullying in the first few hours of camp would be some returning campers not letting a new camper play with them or something like that, and acknowledging that this camper is new and that they could be weird or something like that. Another example during activity rotations could be really could be anything. Again, it could be exclusion, it could be a couple of campers teasing another one. It really just depends. And this goes through all of these different scenarios. It really just depends on what is happening. And so, let's see. Sorry. So, basically, bullying stems from wanting connection to others and wanting to feel power over whatever situations they can control. And so, a way to prevent bullying is to help campers create connections. And so, this is definitely another reason why you should get to know your campers as well as you possibly can. Introduce them on the first day of camp. Really facilitate connections between your campers so that you don't have to deal with situations that regard bullying or teasing in the future. Get to know everyone in the group, games, activities, distraction, one-on-one time with individuals in your group, create a strong group identity, and make sure that there's group responsibility, jobs, and duties. Again, these are ways to help create connections. And then for helping, sorry, I don't know what's happening. For helping campers with their insecurities, different leaders could help, meaning rotate your counselors throughout the different types of campers in your cabin, make different types of pairs for games, provide non-competitive choices, and make sure there's a diversity of choices and variations of activities. So if they don't necessarily feel competent at one thing, they could excel and feel like they have control over how the quote unquote well they do with another activity. And also make sure they understand the process and procedures. We're explicit about your expectations. Do they know how to do things? Just really making sure that you're giving them all the tools necessary for them to excel and exceed at all of the things that they're doing at this camp, and to just try to make it a very, very fun, very easy to have fun at camp. And also, at the very start of camp, make sure to get together with your cabin and create cabin and unit rules or expectations as a group so that they know what you expect of them as their counselor, and that bullying and teasing is not going to be tolerated, and that we are a family, and really just set that tone from the beginning. And so when bullying does happen, now that is when we have to intervene. And unfortunately, this may happen, so here are some ways to alleviate it. So the best intervention for bullies or targets are going to be developed because you know the particular camper. There it is again, know your particular camper, get to know them as much as you can, talk to them, just know where this behavior is stemming from and really try to find why they are acting the way they are. So the top 3 techniques for intervening when bullying is happening: 1, again, get to know everyone. 2, peer self-power, take it away by not being present. And 3, adult monitoring. Let's see. So we are not going to do this role-playing thing because how would we do that? But we are going to actually look at this bullying chart. So the definition of bullying is that bullying is aggressive or abusive behavior intended to hurt another person. Whereas teasing is episodic, reciprocal, and playful, bullying is one-sided, repeated physical or psychological intimidation. And so characteristics. Bullies can come in all shapes and sizes, and some common characteristics are included below. So that's low impulse control, poor problem-solving skills, low empathy, popularity problems, poor social skills, negative attribution bias, and fragile self-esteem. Again, in our behavior management makeup training, we did talk about how uh, these kids do have underdeveloped skills, and these underdeveloped skills could unfortunately result in bullying because they don't really know how to express themselves. And again, if you look at what we were just listed, they are signs of these underdeveloped skills. And the prevalence of bullying. So, in a recent CDC study, 81% of teens admitted to bullying, and 75% of them said they had been bullied. And ironically, bullying may be so prevalent because it is a misguided attempt to form social connections. And so, again, the way to try to prevent bullying is to help facilitate those social connections so that there isn't a reason for them to feel like they aren't connected. Oh, what a thought. So the cause children bully for a variety of reasons, including the thrill, but mostly they bully because they feel socially insecure. That's where we come in. We really try to help them feel comfortable, whether that is with us, that relationship may just begin with us, but then that becomes our responsibility to help them branch out and feel more secure with their own peers themselves. All people do really want to fit in and to feel like others like them and that they belong. And at CASM, all of these kids really belong, so we want to show them that they belong there. Um, when children feel that they don't fit in somehow, when they experience some kind of social rejection or a threat to their role in a group, they may resort to bullying to reestablish their social position. Um, so, the social insecurity that bullies feel, combined with the rejections that they may get from their peers, often leads to feelings of depression and isolation. We really don't want kids to feel like that, especially at camp, because this is what we're trying to create a second home for them, a support system, a place where they can feel like they can express themselves however they need to express themselves. And unfortunately, if they continue to feel depression and isolation, it could become a cycle where the feelings of isolation lead more to the bad behavior that we had talked about in the behavior management makeup training and lead to this bullying and a misguided attempt to try to form these interpersonal connections. So, in the moments of the bad behavior, it could actually be sad behavior from kids. And so, here is a cool, I was gonna say cute, but that's sort of weird. It is a cool diagram of how bullying behavior becomes cyclic. And so there's the social order alarm, and it goes off because someone is rejected or declined from a social standing, which leads to social insecurity, which could potentially lead to bullying behavior if it's not helped or if it's not fixed at that point. And then that could lead to social bonding, disconnection, and status, which goes to even more depression, anxiety, and even more social rejection. So, some interventions. There are 3 steps to this. So, you want to see it, you want to teach about it, and ultimately you want to monitor it. So, your ultimate goal is to redirect the bully's attempt at making a social connection. So, step 1, see bullies and their behavior for what they truly are. So, if you want um, if you want to look at these things, so understanding that popular counts, put this behavior in context, recognize the cycle, remember that bullies are volatile, remember that bullies are biased. So it really just means that all children want to belong, to feel worthy, and to be liked. And when they are doing this behavior, it's really just their social alarm going off. Um, Recognize that this can become a cycle and understand that to stop bullying, you must stop the cycle. So bullies are volatile, and so they're acting out of a place of insecurity, and bullies are biased. So at that point in their social standing and how they feel about their connections to others, they are set up to see neutral events mostly as threatening, which is why they seem biased. And so step 2 is to teach both bullies and targets, who are often the same person, alternate ways of behaving. For bullies, stop any unacceptable, dangerous, or inappropriate behavior immediately. Listen patiently to both sides of the story without shaming or blaming. What really truly led to this interaction. Try to figure it out. Obviously, you have to listen unbiased. You really weren't there to see what happened, and it could seem that when you approached the situation, the target had actually initially started the situation, so you really don't know. Try to figure out what set off a child's self esteem alarm, what made them feel socially uneasy, how can you help this child feel better, and really try to teach the bully alternative ways for having fun and expressing pain, anxiety, and other strong emotions. What we learned in our behavior management model, where you would ask and use a conversation to really try to figure out where the behavior was stemming from. Again, use those classic problem solving techniques to help resolve any disputes if there are any. And then again, spend time with the bully and work to help the bully have some successful experiences. And that's where you're checking in and helping them find other ways to feel socially included. And that will ultimately, hopefully, help boost the bully's self esteem in authentic ways and also increase their trust within you and your own relationship, which is hopefully a way for them to, maybe if they feel, again, socially insecure, to come to you rather than bullying again. And so for targets, teach the children to ignore the teasing. Although it is difficult to do, this works well to make bullying less satisfying. This is sort of like that behavior management technique where it's planned ignoring, whereas you don't want to give the negative behavior attention, because it might just promote more of it to happen. Teach children to make fun of teasing. This takes fun out of bullying by making it seem silly. So saying things like, "Oh, that's a good one," or "Brilliant." Here are some things that they could say. Um, Also, teach children to be assertive and to say no, and thanks for not doing that. So by teaching children to be positive peer influences, and for standing up to bullies, and for saying that, and promoting positive behavior from bullies that had exhibited in the past, it could definitely be effective in showing the bully that their positive behavior is not going unnoticed even by their peers. Teaching children that they don't have to deal with bullying alone. Asking an adult for help right away might be counterproductive, but should always be done in cases where the child's safety is in question. And then the last one is to help the target develop an alliance of protective, supportive peers and adults. The target is not a victim. Step 3 is to definitely monitor both bullies and their targets, praise and guide their process. Again, this goes back to the behavior management video or makeup training, where make sure to spend time with both bullies and the targets, and to check in with them throughout the week, especially in a timely manner, to make sure that they're feeling okay and that they're not feeling any types of triggers for situations that could happen afterwards. And again, this makes them feel like you're really invested in them, because you are, and that you truly care about their positive behavior change. Some other things you got to do: remove a bully from a situation if the abusive or threatening behavior doesn't change. This may mean sending the child home, but this is only after you've really consulted the directors, the camp advisor, etc., and you've given them fair warnings. Use the novelty of camp or school to set a tone of tolerance and cooperation. Again, this starts with day one, where you are going to set the example for your campers to be inclusive and to be socially accepting of everyone, and to just spread the Kesem love and magic, and so that these kids know that bullying is not tolerated. And then when you see this positive behavior change, praise children's good social skills and redirect their bullying behavior by suggesting alternative pro-social behaviors. Let's see. So here are a couple paradoxes about bullying. So we tell kids to be honest with their feelings, but if kids react emotionally to bullying, they tip their hands by allowing the bully to see. They tip their hands by allowing the bully to see what hurts, which can increase bullying behavior. And so this is when we can use all of these steps that we've taught them up here. And so we're just going to slowly or quickly glance over these little paradoxes about bullies. And we tell kids to seek support from a trusted adult, but if kids report bullying to an adult, they get labeled as a tattletale, which can decrease social standing and increase bullying behavior. So there are some balances within the social systems that these kids interact in, but again, bullying should not be tolerated. So it's really just important for us to create an environment where these paradoxes aren't as delicate as they can seem. We tell kids to stand up for themselves and be assertive, but if kids respond to a physical intimidation by fighting back physically, they can get themselves in trouble, whether or not the bully also gets in trouble. So what to do? Again, do not let them get in physical altercations. We're definitely trying to prevent that. We tell kids not to bully other children, but bullying is a misguided attempt to make social connection. Therefore, we may deprive bullies of opportunities for connection. The last paradox is that we single out bullies for punishment and targets for protection, but most bullies are also targets, and most targets are also bullies. Therefore, we may unintentionally punish targets and protect bullies. And so it's really, really important to listen to both sides of the story and to make everything fair from what we hear and from what maybe even our co-counselors see. And so really the easiest way to deal with bullying is to try to prevent it. And when it does happen, if you feel uncomfortable with handling the situation, it's totally okay to ask your counselors, co-counselors for help, your unit leader, any other people on the admin team, whoever. And then again, if you feel like maybe this bullying is stemming from somewhere very violent or somewhere where you think the camper is putting their own safety at risk and it's repetitive, don't hesitate to get the mental health professional involved, upper staff, just so that you feel competent enough to handle the situation and you feel comfortable. If you do have any questions, again, reach out to us about any other like bullying situations you want to ask about. Um, Please do not forget to take the quiz that is associated with this. And thank you so much for watching. Cool.